The next series of 4 lectures are going to focus on development, the first 2 cognitive and emotional development, and the last 2 moral and personality development. And you're going to learn more about this if you go on and take developmental psychology. So Module 13 is entitled Developmental Issues, Prenatal Development, and the Newborn. So when we talk about developmental psychology, obviously we get back to the nature and nurture debate that we had earlier. There's also change and stability. In what ways do we change as we age? In what ways do we stay the same? There's also the continuity versus stages model. So is it kind of a gradual development that we undergo as human beings, or are there some new leaps and stages in terms of our behavior? So we're going to talk about all of that. I particularly like this topic because I've got a little one about that age. Are there certain abilities and challenges that develop at certain ages? Or is it better to think of development as a gradual progression or as steps and phases? So this is somewhat of a debate. There are some researchers who see development as a function of experience, and they see development as continuous and gradual. Other researchers who focus on biological maturation see spurts of growth and other changes that make one stage of development very different from another. So again, even within the field, there's debate as to whether development is continuous or has stages. I mean, I guess obviously there are phases that children go through, but I think a child grows and develops on a daily basis, so I would argue more that it is continuous. So there are 3 types of development: cognitive, moral, and psychosocial. And they all happen at the same time. They're happening at different rates at different times, but are they really separate stages or really just a continuous process of development? And so there are different stage theorists that we're going to touch on that you're going to learn more about in your developmental class, who have different ways of describing these changes in terms of cognitive development, moral development, and psychosocial development. So starting the path to personhood, prenatal development in the newborn. So at conception is when the egg and the sperm unite. We then have prenatal development where everything is going on within the mother's uterus, and it's largely based on the food the mother consumes and the nutrition and the safety the mother can provide. And then at birth we have the competent newborn who's put forth into this world and who has the ability to learn all these new and wonderful things. So in the beginning we have conception, where the sperm and the egg unite to bring genetic material together and form one organism called the zygote, or the fertilized egg. And here's obviously under a very strong microscope you can see the sperm trying to permeate inside the egg. One sperm, as you can see on the right, successfully gets into the egg, and that then fertilizes the egg, which then implants in the wall of the uterus and then grows within the mother's stomach to form a baby. The whole thing is rather kind of incredible when you really think about it. So in the prenatal development, the zygote stage is the first 10 to 14 days. After the nuclei of the egg and the sperm fuse, the cell divides very quickly, like from 2, 4, 6, 16, 100,000. So you can see the development is exponential, literally. So the milestone of the zygote stage is that the cells begin to differentiate into specialized locations and structures. And so between 2 to 8 weeks, you already see the development of the spinal cord. You can see there on the right, the brain, the organs start to develop in the embryo. And so this is when the zygote has implanted in the uteral wall, and the cells develop into bones and organs, which is, again, quite amazing. At 9 weeks, hands and face have developed, and the embryo is now called a fetus. And you can see how it's attached here to the placenta. At this point, you can see it on ultrasound. At 4 months, many more features have developed. So at 4 months, the baby is about 16 weeks. At this point, you can go have an ultrasound, and you can actually identify the sex of the baby because secondary sex characteristics are visible. And you can see the hands, the feet, all those little things are already formed. By 6 months, the fetus might be able to survive outside of the womb, and with the miracles of modern medicine, it's getting earlier and earlier. I think the earliest now is between 22 and 24 weeks babies have survived. There's a lot of dangers to the baby during this period of time because they're relatively helpless. Teratogens are substances such as viruses and chemicals that can damage the developing embryo or fetus, so mother has to be careful in terms of the illnesses she acquires, and they say that all mothers should get the flu shot and try to take care of yourself. There's also fetal alcohol syndrome, which refers to the cognitive behavioral and brain body structure abnormalities that are caused by exposure to alcohol in the fetal stage. And this is particularly, the fetus is particularly vulnerable prior to 12 weeks, which in many cases, sometimes the woman doesn't even know she's pregnant. So if you're thinking about or think you may be pregnant, you should always monitor your alcohol and drug consumption. So fetuses in the womb can respond to sound. They can learn to recognize and adapt to sounds that they previously heard only in the womb. They've done tests where they take babies outside of the womb, and they present familiar sounds and unfamiliar sounds, and the babies turn preferentially to the sounds they heard while they were in the womb. Fetuses can habituate to annoying sounds, becoming less agitated with repeated exposure. So, sounds like the vacuum cleaner, things like that. And then after the fetal period, the child is born. I have to tell you, having done it 3 times, it's a lovely, miraculous time. I've been very lucky. All my births have been easy, but it really is kind of amazing that, the unification of an egg and a sperm can produce a whole little human being. So when the baby is born, they're already born with certain reflexes they don't have to learn. So they have reflexes to ensure they'll be fed, which is called the rooting reflex. So when the baby's face touches something on the cheek, they turn towards that with an open mouth, and that's so that the baby can nurse or take a bottle. The baby also has a sucking reflex, and so even if you stick your finger in the baby's mouth, the baby will suck on it, and so so they know how to get milk from the breast or from the nipple. And the baby also knows to cry when they're hungry, so it's just the way it is a sound that motivates parents to end the noise and feed the baby. So newborns who are only 1 year old will look twice as long as the image on the left as the image on the right. And what can you conclude from that behavior? Basically, the image on the right looks more like a face, and that suggests that babies are innately able to look at faces so that they can look towards their mothers. There are some parts of the development that remain stable throughout the development: our temperament, our overall personality. It's somewhat debatable, right? Some of our attributes change during development, kind of our abilities, our interests, our habits, our traits. But it's very funny. I mean, even in my daughter and my sons, I see a lot of traits that I have that they've not observed in me. But, for example, stubbornness. And my daughter would have never observed that in me, but she has similar stubbornness as I do. And so there are definitely certain traits that are innate. But for example, interests change. Like when my daughter was little, she loved princesses. Now she's totally into Star Wars and has no interest in princesses anymore. So there are certain things that kind of remain the same, but other things can change. So are we essentially the same people over long periods? In general, temperament tends to be stable, so kind of easy kids are usually easy kids, difficult kids are usually a little bit more difficult, but traits can vary, especially attitudes, coping strategies, work habits, and styles of socializing. For example, when my daughter was very young, she was incredibly shy. She wouldn't look anybody in the eye. She didn't, she was very scared and very much attached to me. Now, at the age of 6, she goes out into the world. She really has very few fears, and it's just incredible what a change a few years can make. Personality seems to stabilize with age, so as we get older, we become more sure of who we are, and it helps us form our identity, while the potential for change gives us control over our lives. So it's not to say that we cannot change some aspects of our personality, but that we kind of have a better sense